let me just say too, it's a real honor to be here at Ёнсе. This is such a great institution, has a great reputation. Sadly, I've been to Ёnse now many times as ambassador just to the medical school over and over again, but I digress. Before I get started, I just kind of wanted to see a little bit about the audience, just where everybody's from. Can I just have people who Korean nationals, Korean citizens, can you just raise your hand? All right, good. How about Americans? Oh, interesting. How about people from other countries? Wow. Wow, it's great. Well, this is really a great opportunity. Let's see here. On President Park's decision not to go to Moscow. Again, first of all, this is a decision for the Korean government, and they have to weigh the pros and cons of going to it. I think from our standpoint, the United States, I think where we get concerned about what Moscow is doing is sort of two basic principles, and Tony Blinken, the Deputy Secretary of State, outlined those really well when he was here. Tony's a European sort of scholar by training. In the Clinton administration, he was the top European affairs official at the State Department. So he's very much more well versed on this issue than I am. So I'm just going to try to paraphrase what he said. But essentially, there's two issues at stake here that we really have problems with in terms of the United States. The first issue is the principle of a big country pushing around a little country, right? In Russia, Ukraine, right? That is the principal cause right now in terms of our concerns with Moscow. It's their actions in Ukraine, right? So you have a big country taking territorial sovereignty away from a small country. That just, in this day and age, is just unacceptable to the United States. I think that's point one. The second is a less known issue, but I think Deputy Secretary Blinken did a good job of outlining it when he was here, is that there was an agreement in the early 90s signed by 4 countries. And this agreement essentially was as follows. Ukraine had nuclear weapons on its territory. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and everybody was trying essentially to get to limit the number of countries that had nuclear weapons, essentially get them off their territory. So a 4-party deal was struck between Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and Great Britain. Those are the signatories to essentially say, okay, Ukraine, in exchange for you giving up your nuclear weapons, we will respect your territorial sovereignty, your territorial integrity. I said that wrong both times. Territorial integrity. Well, Ukraine gives up the nuclear weapons, and lo and behold, they've got their sovereignty infringed on in a terrible way. And we think, in terms of Asia policy, that has a potential application out here, right? When you're dealing with nuclear weapons states, right? So, I think that is the crux of our very deep concern about actions in Ukraine. And I think, the Republic of Korea had to make its own decision, and I think made an informed choice. But again, it's their decision to make, and I'll leave it there. The reason we do missile defense in the Asia-Pacific region is because of the North Korean threat. It's why we spend in a time of tight Pentagon budgets, why we are spending a lot of money on missile defense out here in Asia Pacific. It's not because we want to do it. We could use the money elsewhere. Let me tell you, there are a lot of needs in the U.S. military. I sat in those conversations when you're down to the last budget decisions, and they are agonizing. How big is the U.S. Army? How many fast attack submarines are we going to buy? How much money for special operations forces? The trade-offs are excruciating. But the reason we have spent more money on missile defense, and you've seen it we put more national missile defense in Alaska, we put new Navy ships and are in the process of putting new Navy ships into Japan, we added a THAAD battery in Guam. That is all because of the North Korean threat. And we're very worried about the North Korean threat and their capabilities and what they can do to our allies, U.S. troops, and the U.S. homeland. And so what we're trying to do is work with China and others to roll back that threat. And our most our preferred way to do it is diplomatically, but we have not gotten any positive response from the North Koreans. You've seen the South Koreans offer unconditional inter-Korean talks. That's been rejected. You've seen the United States offer credible and authentic negotiations time and time again. That's been rejected. They're not really even talking much to the Chinese these days. So in the absence of that, we've got to increase our sanctions to make sure that there are costs associated with a nuclear and missile program. We've got to add our deterrent value in missile defense and other capabilities. And then we've got to continue our diplomatic efforts. One, to prevent, to basically roll back the policy of Byunjin. And also, but our most preferred way is a diplomatic way, a diplomatic solution. And I'd finally say by this administration, the Obama administration, believes in principled diplomacy strongly. And I think the proof is in the pudding, as they'd say. Iran, Cuba, Myanmar. Over the last 6 years, those are 3 countries where the US had years of historical enmity built up. And the President of the United States campaigned on this issue. He came into office, and over the course of 6 years, we have worked very hard to engage in principled diplomacy with those 3 countries. So I think the outlier here is North Korea and the North Koreans' willingness to talk. And if they come back to the table and are interested in authentic, incredible negotiations, the United States, I'm convinced the other 5-party talks, which are incredibly unified at this moment, also stand ready. So that's a long answer on that, but that's the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue is a missile threat by the North Koreans. Last on what do I want to do? Mainly retire. I'm tired, and I guess what I'd say is this: I don't know, and I've always been a guy that has never really had a plan. I ended up in Washington, purely by accident. I mean, it's because my college roommate played football for the Washington Redskins, and I had a sort of a free place to stay, and I was interested in international relations, but I also wanted to move back to China, and a girlfriend was involved, and so it got complicated fast, and I didn't make it to China, back to China, but I did make it to Washington, and after that it was just sort of a series of accidents. I thought I was going to go back to law school. Never made it back to law school. My father's a lawyer. He's disappointed. My sister's a lawyer, and she is the favorite now. So the answer is I don't know. I just don't know. I will say that. Look, my wife's career, believe it or not, is the one that's actually more successful. She's a senior vice president in a big U.S. company. She loves her job. She sacrificed a lot to come out here. So I think when this is all over, I think it's kind of her turn. And I think, she's working crazy hours and telecommuting and dealing with the baby. And so I think, I have to sort of figure a way. I think we need to figure out a way to keep her career on track. Because one, she made a lot of sacrifices here, and for me, and I deserve that. Two, she makes all the money, so we need to keep that career on track too. So that's all a long way of saying is I don't know, but I think we'll figure it out. And look, I think the last point is some of the best opportunities come to you when you least know it. I would just say I ended up working for then Senator Obama. It was purely by accident. I was having a bad day. I was complaining to a friend of mine who is now the White House Chief of Staff, and he said, you need to go interview with this guy, Obama. And I said, I'm not really interested in leaving my job. I'm just having a bad day at my job. He said, no, just go interview. Long story short, I ended up with an interview. Obama and I hit it off, and it took me down a completely different path. And then, the military thing was completely sort of by happenstance too. I kind of wanted to go back. I'm from a military family, wanted to go to officer candidate school. I was kind of getting older. I was getting to that decision point, and this way of joining the reserves that was a little easier came along, and I was sort of minding my own business when a guy who was an intelligence officer with SEAL Team 1 came through to interview for a civilian job, And I kind of said, well, you're interested in my job, and I'm interested in your job. How do we make this work? And there's a trade here, and that's how I ended up in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you know, the best job I ever had was with the SEAL teams. I'd probably still be doing it today, but my wife really didn't like it that much. So anyway, and you do have bigger responsibilities to your family. So anyway, that's all a long way of saying, you know, figure it out, see what happens, and you know, it's fun to ride the wave. So there you go.